Shiva Sarigo Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shyam Kunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavanam Ki Jai Mathuradam Ki Jai Jagannath Swami Ki Jai Yamunamai Ki Jai Shrimati Lasi Devi Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bo. All glories the assembled devotees. All glories the assembled devotees. All glories the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Go. Actually, okay, so with that in mind, so today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 23rd chapter, text 38. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Atanusmritya Vipraste Anvatapyan Kritagasaha Yad Vishveshvarayor Yachnam Ahamna Re Vidamvayoho Atanusmritya Vipraste Anvatapyan Kritagasaha Yad Vishveshvarayor Yashnam Ahanmanre Vitambayoho Atanusmritya Vipraste Anvatapyan Kritagasaha Yad Vishveshvarayor Yachnam Ahanmadri Vitambayaho Atanusmritya Vipraste Anvatapyan Kritagasaha Yad Vishveshvarayor Yachnam Ahanmanri Vitambayaho. Okay, anyone? Ta then Anusmritya, coming to their senses, Vipraha, the Brahmanas, Te, they, Anvatapyan, felt great remorse, Krita Agasaha, having committed sinful offenses. Yet, because Vishva Ishvarayoho, of the two lords of the universe, Krishna and Balaram, Yachnam, the humble supplication. Ahanma, we transgressed. Rividam Vayoho, of those who were deceptively appearing as human beings. The translation, the Brahmanas then came to their senses and began to feel great remorse. They thought, we have sinned, for we have denied the request of the two lords of the universe, who deceptively appeared as ordinary human beings. You can repeat. The Brahmanas then came to their senses and began to feel great remorse. They thought, we have sinned. We have denied the request of the two lords of the universe, who deceptively appeared as ordinary human beings. Phew. So purport by the servants of His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram did not try to deceive the Brahmanas. They straightforwardly requested food from them. Rather, the Brahmanas deceived themselves, as indicated by the Sanskrit word Dri Vidambayaho, which means that Krishna and Balaram are bewildering for an ordinary human being who considers them also to be human. Still, because the wives of the Brahmanas were great devotees of the Lord, the foolish Brahmanas received spiritual benefit and finally came to their senses. So, let me read the Sanskrit verse again. Atana smritya vipraste anvatapyan kratagasaha yad vishveshvarayor yachnam ahanmadri vidambayaho. So, omagana tiviranda shagadandana shlagya dakshi undadipam tasmai shugadve namaha. So we're going to read some of the commentaries of the Acharyas, and then we'll speak. There's actually many points here. And the one point I want to talk about is how the wives were great devotees of the Brahmanas. But the Acharyas, we'll get into that when we talk about the Acharyas and their commentaries. And, I mean, there's other points here, such as how we deceive ourselves, and that way we're responsible for our own delusion. And another point we won't really get a chance to deal with here is about remorse. You know, purifying yourself by being remorseful. Actually, I'll just mention it real quickly. Prabhupada said remorse is not enough. Not only do you have to recognize that you've done something, feel remorseful for it, but you've got to rectify it. So it's one thing to say, you know, I feel really bad about what I did, and I may do it again. So it's just like, and before I get into the main topic, it's just like going to confession in the church. That you go to the church and you say, I feel real remorseful, my dear Father. I've sinned, and the Father says, I forgive you, or the Lord forgives you. Next week you come back and do the same thing. That's called Kundra Sotra, like an elephant taking a bath, throwing dust on himself, and then taking a bath again, and throwing dust on himself. It's pretty stupid. So, anyway, so the Brahmanas, they're actually coming to their senses here. It's not that they're just feeling remorse, they're rectifying their consciousness. So it's a little more than that. But let's read the purports and commentaries of the Acharyas, since this is a far more interesting subject matter for me, since this is what we're dealing with right now on many morning calls when I'm not here in the morning. So you'll get a chance to hear about this. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments that though the women were wives, they regarded them as their gurus. Wow. I'll repeat that. Though the women were their wives, they regarded them as their gurus. My God. And they were Brahmanas. And they criticized themselves since they had no devotion. The bhakti of their wives was impossible to see in ordinary society. alo ki kam. And Jiva Goswami goes further into the same detail when he says, by the power of association with their wives who attain the mercy of the Lord, who had said, your husbands will not find fault in you, their husbands came to their senses. In other words, by the mercy of their wives. This verse and the rest of the chapter glorify their wives. After this incident, the husbands, though having cried, became repentant. How could the two lords beg? They were engaged in spreading human-like pastimes, nri vidambayoho, or they laughed at men like us who have no devotion. The Brahmana's use of the first person, we have ignored the request for food, shows that a trace of false identity remained, or it shows their shame. Two things. And Sanatana Goswami actually goes further into this. And some of it's repetitive. By the power of association with their wives who attained the mercy of the Lord, their husbands came to their senses. This verse and the rest of the chapter glorify their wives. After this incident, they repented because the husband's crooked attitude was destroyed. After the sacrifice was concluded, with accepting the Lord's remnants, the spiritual effect manifested and they became purified. Or after the Lord had eaten, by his accepting the food, they manifested bhakti. Or after the wives came to the sacrifice, by the potency of seeing their wives, they repented. Examining closely, anusmritya, that they had been afflicted with pride, they began to lament anvatapyam. We have refused the request not only of the avatar of the Lord, but of the avatari, Krishna. So let me explain. Avatari is like the source of all the avatars. So just like it says in the Bhagavatam, Ite Chanksa Kalapun Sa Krishna Stu Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna is the source of all the various avatars. So Krishna is an avatar, but he's also avatari. You understand? Okay. Vishvesha Yaho. If they are lords of the universe, why do they request food? They spread pastimes which are human-like. Or they laughed at men like us who have no devotion. The Brahmana's use of aham, we have ignored the request for food, shows that a trace of false identity, same thing in nature. Or giving up identity as Brahmanas, they saw themselves as ordinary humans. So here we're dealing with something that's really interesting. That, of course, the Brahmana is considered to be on the top of human society. He's considered to be the guru of everybody else. And sometimes you hear in Varnashram, some Varnashram explanations by those who are advocates of Varnashram, rather than those who are advocates of pure bhakti, that the Brahmanas are able to give Brahminical qualities to their wives because they're the wives. And some people say that women just take on the qualities of their husbands. So that you have this particular argument going on. So the women, they're just like silly putty. I don't know if you know what silly putty is. Silly putty is like what we used to put on our comic books and pick up the image of the. Anyone know what it is? Pick up the image of the comic books. It just really has no personality on and of itself. Or, it's just a blob. So there's this discussion going on like this. And so, of course, the Acharyas, the Vaishnava Acharyas, tell us that, women, as well as men, have different qualities and are situated differently in the Varnashram system. As Mother Irmala was talking about the other day, that it's important when there's marriages that people of the same quality get married to each other. Because it can be a disaster if you have people, let's say if you have people, well, this is called pratilom. Let's say the man is just like, goes to the bars a lot or something like that. Anyway, so he's a Shudra, and the woman's a Brahmin. So the woman wants to study, and the man, he just wants to go out and get drunk with his friends. Very good combination. So that That's one of the problems, of course, nowadays with what we call love marriages. Love marriages means that, people look in their eyes, they fall in love, they don't consider any of these different factors. And then you end up with a mixed marriage, really disastrous situation with people with different interests, people with different proclivities. People want to train their children up as little Rakshasas or train their children up as Brahmanas, and you end up with a disaster. So therefore, these things have to be taken into consideration. Now, we're not specifically advocating arranged marriages, but there was some benefit to it. But we're advocating that people should be very careful when dealing with marriages and just like ascertain, is this compatible? Look at the astrology, give people what's it called, a Myers-Briggs assessment, do a color test, a Lucier color test on everybody to understand. Anyway, but the point is that women do have, the real point I'm making here is that women do have varnas. It's true. And so that has to be considered. And now, apart from that varna thing, let's forget about varnas for a second. Then if someone is a Vaishnava, they're automatically a Brahmin. They may be serving Krishna according to his psychophysical nature in the body, but they shouldn't be considered to be Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras, or anything like that. For example, someone who is a Vaishnava may be cleaning the toilets, which traditionally would be considered, let's say, a Shudra activity. But that person should not be thought of as a Shudra. That person should be thought of as a Brahmin, Vaishnava Brahmin. It's really, really important. And anybody, regardless of gender or caste or national origin, just like Prabhupada was talking the other day about, he was an Australian, he was talking about the Aborigines. And people were talking to him about the Aborigines. And Prabhupada said that they could actually become devotees in their own right. Now in Australia, the history is with the Aborigines, they were considered so uncivilized that when the so-called white people went there for the first time, they actually had hunting season on them. I mean, and sometimes, even, of course, we're not advocating that, obviously. That's horrible. But there are some uncivilized, what in India would be called the Adivas, or probably sometimes called the Junglis. And sometimes people take the opposite tact of talking about the noble savage. We have to understand there are some civilized, let's say, people, and there are some uncivilized people. But if someone takes the Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada said, then even people who are uncivilized, the Junglis, which is where jungle came from, or the Adivasis, or the Aborigines, or whatever, they can become pure devotees to the Lord, and they can actually become gurus. So there's no barrier to someone becoming a pure devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, regardless of their background. But many people think of the background or impose some social or racial or gender discrimination because that's what they've been taught since they've been young. I mean, there's many cultures in America it's like that. In India, the caste consciousness is very, very prominent. And so they have this conditioning. Of course, in America, too, we've just recently seen so much racism rear its ugly head. So there's this conditioning, and sometimes people come to Krishna consciousness with some past conditioning, and they project that past conditioning upon the Krishna conscious application. And therefore, we have this whole discussion going on whether Vaishnavis, or people in ladies' bodies, let's use the word Vaishnavis, can become gurus. So what I wanted to do, we have some quotes here, which I've been working on, not simply because of this class, but because of this whole discussion we have going on. We can call it a discussion or whatever it is. It's going on mediation discussion. And I have some quotes here I'd like to bring out to prove my point that anybody, men, women, aborigines, children, I mean, just like we have the heads of one of our sampradayas, the four Kumaras, there were four little children, 5 years old. And the head of another sampradaya is Lakshmi, who's a lady, of course. She's also the Shakti of the Lord. So let me give some evidence from the acharyas and from the Vedic literatures to prove my particular point, because in Krishna consciousness or in the Vedic civilization, one has to be able to show their point or prove their point by reciting Shastra or from the past acharyas. So here's something written by Gopal Bhatta Goswami, which is really interesting. This is about someone who is atoning, doing a type of atonement because they fell down and they gave up following their vows of initiation. He said, if the Guru is not present, one should accept the mantras again from the Guru's wife. My God. And then he goes through a whole thing. If not, then this, if not, then this. If she's not there, then whatever. That's not really important for this class. And here's another point about how ladies can become gurus. One, Bhaktivinoda Thakur's own Diksha lineage, as described in his letter of initiation, has 3 Vaishnavis in it. Rama Mani Goswamini, Guna Manjari Goswamini, and Maheshwari Goswamini. And they're all accepted by him as Diksha Gurus in his line. And here's another quote from Prabhupada. This is from a letter to Shilavati in New Vrindavan, June 14th, 1969. Now if you can induce all the women of Los Angeles to place an altar in their homes and help their husbands have peaceful, happy home life in Krishna consciousness, that will be a great service for you. The actual system is that the husband is spiritual master to his wife, but if the wife can bring her husband into practicing this process, then it is all right that the husband accepts his wife as a spiritual master. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said that anyone who knows the science of Krishna, that person should be accepted as spiritual master regardless of any material so-called qualification, such as rich or poor, man or woman, or Brahman or Shudra. Pretty clear, isn't it? So the point is, if someone knows the science of Krishna consciousness, of course there's that famous quote that Lord Chaitanya gives, Kiva Vipra, Kiva Nyasi, Shudra Kena Nai, Ye Krishna Tattva Veda, Say Guru Hai. It doesn't matter whether it's a learned person, Kiva Vipra, Kiva Nyasi, Sannyasi, Shudra Kena Nai, whether one is a Shudra, it doesn't, by material estimation. Like we were talking about Shudra, Aborigine, Adivasis, and everything like that. It doesn't matter. If one who knows the science of Krishna, say Guru Hoy, that person could become Guru. But the important thing is to know the science of Krishna. Very, very important point. Here's another letter Prabhupada wrote. And people say, well, his letter is not important. It's Prabhupada's letters. The best thing is if you come and live with us for some time and learn thoroughly the Krishna science. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said anyone can become a guru in the matter of teaching about Krishna, provided he or she thoroughly learns the Krishna science. Pretty good. Let's see. So here's another point. This is a quote from the Padma Purana. That's Prabhupada's, from Prabhupada. In the Padma Purana it is said, Na Shudra Bhagavad Bhaktas Te Atu Bhagavata Mata Sava Varneshu Te Shudra Ye Bhakta Janardane. A devotee should never be considered a Shudra. All the devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead should be recognized as Bhagavatas. If one is not a devotee of Lord Krishna, however, Even if born in a Brahmin, Kshatriya, or Vaishya family, he should be considered a Shudra. uh, the Padma Purana further states, and there's Sanskrit which I'll read, Shudram va bhagavat bhaktam vishadam swa pacham tata vichyate jati samanyat sayati narakam durvam. One who considers a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead who was born in a family of Shudras, Nishadas, or Chandalas. Nishadas means like forest people. Chandalas means like meat eaters. Shudras means people who serve the rest in the mode of ignorance. It says, one who considers this devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead who was born in a family of Shudras, Nishadas, or Chandalas to become to a particular caste certainly goes to hell. Oh my God. Here's another quote. Actually, I have so many quotes here because they don't accept them. However, I'll tell you something interesting at the end. However, since both the boys and girls are being trained to become preachers, these girls are not ordinary girls, but as good as their brothers who are preaching Krishna consciousness. Therefore, to engage both boys and girls in fully transcendental activities is a policy intended to spread the Krishna conscious movement. Another quote is a letter, 1976. It's the final year before Prabhupada left. It's to a professor. Because in the spiritual platform, there's no distinction, men, women, or black, white, or big or small. No, everyone is spirit soul, pandita, samadarshana, that's in the Bhagavad Gita. One who is actually learned, he's samadarshana. He does not make any distinction. But so far, our material body is concerned, there must be some distinction for keeping the body in order. Obviously, there has to be some distinction, just like we have a men's ashram and a women's ashram. Not all one. So here's a statement that's really in regard to this verse in the Bhagavatam today. This is from the Hari Bhakti Vilas. It states, and I'm not going to read the Sanskrit since we have very little time. It says, whether a woman is married or widow, if she is engaged in devotional service to Lord Vishnu, she delivers 100 generations of her family. And here's another quote. In 1976, another. Actually, anyone who has attained the perfection, she can become guru. But man or woman, unless one has attained the perfection, in other words, Prabhupada says you have to attain the perfection. The qualification of guru is that he must be fully cognizant of the science of Krishna. Then he or she can become guru. Ye Krishna Tattva say Guru. Hi, this interview with Professor O'Connell, Motilal, and Shivaram. Not our Shivaram, but some other professor like that. And then the final thing I wanted to talk about was that one of the main objections that people make is that women can't be gurus because they can't give a Brahmin thread because they don't have a Brahmin thread. Now, the point, very, very important about Brahmin threads, is the Brahmin threads, and I can read this. This is exactly what I was going to say. It says that Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, I knew this already, introduced the Brahmin threads for those who are not born in Brahmin families, because previously the men who were born in Brahmin families got the Upanayanam, the thread, when they were about 5 or 6 years old. And it's not that they got it at Vaishnava initiation. But Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur started doing it for Vaishnavas so that people would respect us as Brahmanas, as a preaching tool. And so many cases, in this particular citation, it's mentioned that many cases a Vaishnava who is a Bhajananandi, a pure devotee, does not take the Brahmin thread, which is called the Savitra Samskara. But the system of using the Brahmin thread is actually used for preaching work. In other words, just like taking sannyas. We were talking about this before. So sometimes the ladies say, why can't we take sannyas? But that's not really the point. This whole dress of sannyas is meant to impress people of a certain culture. Otherwise, it's not really that significant because one can take sannyas in turn and one can be a sannyasi in a family life, one could be a sannyasi internally, which is the important point. But the external sannyas, which is actually forbidden in Kali Yuga, except for preaching, is simply meant to attract people of a certain culture. In America, it doesn't really make a difference. In India, it does make a difference because in India, if you dress like this, people come up to you, they give you donations, a good way to make a living. So, facetiously, and people will listen to you. Like Lord Chaitanya took sannyas, and we were reading about this in the Chaitanya Charitamrita the other day. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took sannyas as a preaching trick, so the people would respect him. So for women to dress like this, it's not a preaching trick. Therefore, we don't have women dressing like this because it's not a preaching trick. It doesn't help with the preaching. I dress like this because it helps with the preaching. That's the point. And so we have a Brahmin thread because it helps with the preaching. And actually, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur took Gayatri initiation or Vaishnava Pancharatraki initiation from Gorkashodas Babaji Maharaj, who didn't have a Brahmin thread. So that whole argument that ladies can't become gurus because they don't have a Brahmin thread and they can't give a Brahmin thread it doesn't work. It really doesn't work because as I mentioned before, the Brahmin thread is just a symbol to help us preach, number one. And secondly, the real point is the mantra, getting the mantra from the spiritual master. So in other words, it says here, I've just reiterated what it says here, giving the Brahmin thread is a preaching strategy, not an indication of spiritual status. So it's not. So anyway, so there's one or two more quotes, or actually citations I wanted to read. So someone may say, well, are women gurus accepted in the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya at all? Or is this kind of proposing something that's never been done before? Well, here's one example. There's a lady named Jayashree Goswamini of one of the Gaudiya Maths, and she's accepted as the head and acharya of the Shri Guru Prapana Ashram since 1994. And she's a disciple of a disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur advocated this because he had a vision of Vishnu Pali, an ashram for Vaishnavis who practice devotional service and renunciation. And Jayashree Goswamini initiates both men and women. And she had her Vyas Puja ceremony in 2019. Sannyasis and brahmacharis from the Gaudiya Vedanta Samiti, that's one of the Gaudiya Maths, and several of the Gaudiya Maths attended and offered their homage to her on that particular day. So it's something that's accepted. And so according to this verse that we're reading today, that these Brahmins' wives were actually their gurus. And so that was good enough for them, 5,000 years ago when it was a previous yuga. It's also good enough for us right now that gurus should be ascertained according to the qualities, just like we have in the Bhagavad Gita. Chaturvarna mayashishtam guna karma vibhagasha. That verse states that one should be ascertained to be of a particular varna according to his qualities and work, his or her qualities and work. And that verse doesn't just apply to men, it applies to women too. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. We have about half a minute left for class. Any questions or comments about these things? Yes. You're talking about sannyas now. Yeah, it's someone's consciousness or level of advancement in devotional service, which has nothing to do with the body. I mean, the first thing we learned when we joined the Krishna conscious movement was what? We're not the body. It's the first lesson in Bhagavad Gita. Yes. Like fanatic like me. Okay. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, Ki Jai, Radical.
Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Enam Kanvantam Aravindanalayataksham Varhavatam Samasitam Buddhasundarangam Kandar Agom Vidamaniya Vishesha Shobham Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Andani Yasa Sakalen Priya Priti Manti Asyan Vipan Vikayanti Jiram Naganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadhu Jala Vigrahasya Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami
Whoops. Ready? Jai Radhe, Jai Radhe, Radhe. Jai Radhe, Jai Sri Radhe. Radhe, Jai Radhe, Radhe. Jai Radhe, Jai Sri Radhe. Jai Radhe, Jai Radhe, Radhe. Jai Radhe, Jai Sri Radhe. Radhe, Jai Radhe, Radhe. Jai Radhe, Jai Sri Radhe. Jai Radhe, Jai Radhe, Radhe. Jai Radhe, Jai Sri Radhe. Radhe, Jai Radhe, Radhe. Jai Radhe, Jai Sri Radhe. Jai Radhe, Radhe, Radhe. Jai Radhe, Jai Sri Radhe. Jai Radhe, Radhe, Radhe. Jai Radhe, Jai Sri Radhe. Jai Krishna, Jai Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Jaya Shri Krishna, Jai Krishna, Jaya Krishna, Krishna, Jai Krishna, Jaya Shri Krishna, Jai Krishna, Jaya Krishna, Krishna, Jai Krishna, Jaya Shri Krishna, Jai Krishna, Jaya Krishna, Krishna, Jai Krishna, Jaya Shri Krishna, Jai Krishna, Jaya Krishna, Krishna, Jai Krishna, Jaya Shri Krishna, Jai Krishna, Jaya Krishna, Krishna, Jai Krishna, Jaya Shri Krishna, Jai Krishna, 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 Jai Krishna, Jaya Shri Krishna, Krishna, Jaya Krishna, Krishna, Jai Krishna, Jaya Shri Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Jai Radhe, Jai Radhe, Radhe, Jai Radhe, Jai Shri Radhe, Hey Radhe, Jai Radhe, Jai Shri Radhe, Jai Krishna, Jai Krishna, Krishna, Jai Krishna, Jai Shri Krishna. Jai Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Jaya Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Jaya Srila Prabhupada, Radha Golokan Anurada, Golokan Anurada, Hey, Golokan Anurada, Golokan Anurada, Jaya Radha, looking on the Radha, looking on the Radha, hey. Looking on the Radha, looking on the Radha. Jaya Radha, Jaya Radha, Jaya Radha, Jaya Radha. Jayo Radhe, 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 Jaya Sri Radhe, Jai Om Vishnupad, Paramahansa Paramahansa, all still Teta Satashi Shimad, His Divine Grace Abhaya Charanara Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Jai, ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Adanta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shidway Gadadha Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrindikajai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shyam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Vrindavanam Kijai Madhuram Kijai Jagadasami Kijai Yamunamai Kijai Shrimati Lasi Devi Kijai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Kijai Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bo. All glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bo. Okay. Shastra.